and get started. It's my pleasure to welcome you to a lecture that is both the final lecture in the Introduction to Digital Humanities Ringvorlesung for this semester, and also we have the great privilege of having this collaboration with the Austrian Center for Digital Humanities and Cultural Heritage, so that this is also the ACDH-CH lecture 10.1, I believe it is. So this means that this is the 10th year now. We're into the 10th year that the ACDH-CH lectures have been going. They're a fixture that has been running as long as the Austrian Center for Digital Humanities and later the Austrian Center for Digital Humanities and Cultural Heritage have been around. It's an opportunity for international experts to present their research, to offer insights into the impact of digital technology on their work, and to reflect on the future role of the digital humanities. So we're very excited this evening to introduce Andreas Witt, who is professor of, who's head of the Digital Linguistics Department at the Leibniz Institute for the German Language in Mannheim. He heads the department there and is also professor for Computational Humanities and Text Technology at Mannheim, and honorary professor at the Institute for Computational Linguistics at the University of Heidelberg. He's been very active in the field of data preservation and infrastructures for language data, and he is now spokesperson for the Text Plus Consortium, which is a consortium of the German NFDI, so National Research Data Infrastructure, and obviously, as the name suggests, specializing in text data. He is the national coordinator of CLARIN-D, the German version of the CLARIN European Research Infrastructure Consortium, a member of the executive board of Nestor, which is a competence network for digital preservation, and he is editor of the book Digital Linguistics and co-editor of the upcoming Routledge Handbook of Digital Linguistics. So I am very happy to welcome you this evening with that wonderful array of laurels, and looking very much forward to our lecture on digital linguistics.
Thank you very much, Tara. And thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you very much for being here and for your interest in digital linguistics. In this talk, I will try to unreveal the world of digital linguistics, a rising field at the intersection of linguistics and technology. We'll define digital linguistics, understand its connections with computational linguistics on the one hand and with digital humanities on the other hand. And later I would like to explore some activities I'm involved in and that belong somehow to the digital linguistics field. But before I talk about digital linguistics, I would like to talk about linguistics. What is linguistics? Linguistics, as in this other Routledge Handbook of Linguistics, it is defined. Linguistics is the study of the human ability to produce and to interpret language in speaking, writing, and signing. All languages and all varieties of everyday language constitute potential data for linguistic research, as do the relationship between them and the relations and structures of their components. A linguist is someone who studies and describes the structure and the composition of language and or languages in a methodological and rigorous manner. That's what linguistics is in a nutshell. Linguistics belongs to the humanities, since the humanities deal with the human society, the human culture. So linguistics is a core element of the humanities and plays a crucial role in the understanding of the human society and culture. By exploring fundamental questions and traditions, linguistics serves as a mirror reflecting the complexities of language and its profound connection to broader aspects of human civilization. So linguistics is traditionally a more or less important part of the humanities. By the way, this picture was generated with Stable Diffusion. Now I want to talk a little bit about computational linguistics. as the name indicates, computational linguistics is linguistics, and computational linguistics is also described in a chapter in this Wordlife Handbook for Linguistics, in a chapter by Ann Kopstek, what is computational linguistics? And she started with the presentation that computational linguistics concerns the computational modeling of human language. In fact, while the term computational linguistics suggests it is a big branch of linguistics, it is best to view it as a discipline on its own right, with some connections to linguistics which are close in some sub-areas and hardly exists at all in others. If you look at computational linguistics conferences today, you will probably see what she meant with this. Computational linguistics is also seen in a more or less humorous way by Randall Munroe, the creator of the webcomics XKCD, and he offered a kind of a humorous self-description of a computational linguist or of computational linguistics in the way, oh, look at me, my field is so ill-defined I can subscribe to any dozens of contradictory models and still be taken seriously. It's an XKCD, some of you might know it, and I only show it briefly because he's not a big fan of computational linguistics, as you can see in this comic. But the difficulties on how linguistics and computational linguistics relate can be seen if you have a look at the origins of computational linguistics. Computational linguistics emerged already some 70 years ago in the 1950s as a field of at the intersection of linguistics and technology. However, over time, it has evolved into a discipline distinct from traditional linguistics, with natural language processing, or NLP, becoming its prominent alternative. The term natural language processing emerged as an alternative descriptor of computational linguistics, and natural language processing emphasizes the engineering and the technological aspects of working with language, and essentially reflecting already the shift from its linguistic focus. In the contemporary landscape, natural language processing is predominantly viewed as an engineering task. The emphasis has moved from theoretical linguistics inquiries to practical applications, with technology playing a central role in this processing. And this is not really new. It started already in the 70s, 80s, when Frederick Jelinek, a famous Czech-American researcher, notable figure in computational linguistics, led at that time the continuous speech recognition group at IBM, so over the 70s and the 80s. And during a workshop in 1985, Jelinek remarked, humorously, but also seriously somehow, every time we fire a linguist, the performance rate of our system goes up. This statement underscores the evolving nature of computational linguistics away from traditional linguistic methodology. And today, we have to admit, lots of research done in computational linguistics does neither belong to linguistics nor to the humanities any longer. And this can also be seen if we look at one interview given by Noam Chomsky, probably the most influential linguist from the second half of the 20th century. And in 2022, he gave an interview and he was asked about language models. At that time, GPT was already published, not ChatGPT, at least not to the wider public, but anyway, it was there, and he was asked about these things, and he answered, well, first we should ask the question whether large language models have achieved anything. Anything? In this domain? The answer is no. And then I think he repeats these no several times. All it does is waste of a lot of energy in California. I should be more careful. It has some engineering applications that can be used to improve, for instance, live transcription, which I'm very happy about because I like to use it. But I like bulldozers too. It's a lot easier than cleaning the snow by hand. But it's not a contribution to science. It's okay. I mean, if you want to use it, do it, essentially. He continued also with some ideas on GPT-4. GPT-4 is coming along. That was not out at that time. Which is supposed to gonna have trillion parameters. It will be exactly the same. It will even use a little bit more of energy. So we talked about linguistics and computational linguistics. Now I'm diving into the digital humanities, and I would like to talk about the digital aspect. Digital aspects, digital is seen in computer technology. You've seen it, for instance, in data centers. And data centers play a pivotal role in modern research with dual responsibilities, essentially, encompassing computing tasks such as simulation and visualization. So we have on the one hand the computing, and on the other hand we do have the storing part, like archiving, encoding, annotation, digitization. Digital approaches in research are not directly anchored in the reality, but in the machine processable representation of this reality. And I would like to make this with the analogy of what people in engineering call a digital twin. So imagine the right side is the reality. So we are in Austria, so we do see an Austrian train in the mountains, and there's a computer center with storage and computing. The concept of the digital twin was built some 15 years ago. It originated in the 21st century already in the aerospace engineering, and it redefines product development and lifecycle management. It is a dynamic digital representation of physical objects, constantly updated with real-time data from diverse sources. So we do have a digital representation of an object, a system, and we do some computing with this digital object as if this digital object would be, in a way, the twin of the real object. I come back to this later. Now let's talk a little bit about language, because linguistics deals with language. And Ferdinand de Saussure, probably the most influential linguist from the first half of the 20th century, made this distinction between the parole, la langue, et la langage. The parole refers to the specific individual use of language, encompassing spoken interactions, written text, and various forms of communication in a given context. Langue is the system. It refers to the systematic structure of science within a language text, essentially a specific individual language like English, French, Lithuanian, Yoruba, or what have you, is a langue, according to this definition. what we have in English, always language, yeah? So we need, it's helpful to have these French terms for this. And then we have the langage. So, and this is the human, it denotes the overarching human capacity to use and interpret language, and is transcending any specific language. So all the language, our language capacity is the langage. So what all the languages do have in common. So the Saussure's framework provides a nuanced understanding of language by distinguishing between specific uses, parole, the structural system of a specific language, lang, and the universal human capacity of language use, langage. If we do linguistic research today, we do have the problem, well, first of all, it's a good thing, but we have the problem that the dealing with language is something that should be based in reality. And we do language studies nowadays, after the empirical turn in the 20th century, essentially with language data. And language data is parole. But parole is not static. It is ephemeral. It changes. So spoken language, even recorded, loses aspects of its meaning. Printed language also degrades over time, and all language material is essentially a non-static issue. And if we would like to deal with these language essentially witnesses, one way would be that we build a digital twin of this language. So in a way, a recording could be seen as a digital twin of a spoken sentence, text, whatsoever. A written text can be seen as a could have a digital twin if encoded in, I don't know, a text of Unicode characters and so on. So a digital twin of an act of parole is a scanned document, a plain text with metadata. A digital twin, if we continue with this analogy, a digital twin of the lang would be a collection of digital language data from which linguistically valuable information trends and patterns can be found. Essentially what we have in a reference corpus for a single language. For instance, the British National Corpus can be seen as a digital twin of the British language in the 1990s. Yeah? Of course, it's more a sibling than a twin, but yeah. And the digital twin of a langage could be seen, for instance, a large language model. I think this is a little bit arguable, but in a way, if you model lots of things and you abstract from this text, then you can see this text also as a kind of a model for specific uses of language. You could use it for generalizations, and I'm very excited to look into the next 10 years when people not only use large language models to do this in an engineering way, to achieve something, that if they are able to do some research on these abstractions. I don't know whether this happens, but maybe. Would be interesting. So, now let's come to the digital humanities. Digital humanities, as all of you know, deal with the human society, with the human culture, and with the fundamental questions asked by humans by the means or by means of computer technology. So we ask essentially in the digital humanities the same questions as the humanities do, but in a way that would not be possible without the use of computers or digital devices. I'm pretty sure that I know this definition from somebody, but I have tried to figure it out and I haven't found it, but this is my working definition for digital humanities since years. So if something that would not be possible without a computer in the humanities, then it's digital humanities. So this separates us from everybody uses computers to write a text or to check something, but you could do this also in the library. You could write with a typewriter if you like, yeah? So this is not necessarily digital humanities. But if it would not be possible to get these results in an appropriate time, then without the use of computers, then we talk about digital humanities. This is digital humanities in the broadest sense. And now is the question, is linguistics, about the relation between linguistics and the digital humanities, is linguistics part of the digital humanities? Well, since linguistics is the humanities, belongs to the humanities, linguistics is part of the humanities. Does linguistics done with computers belong to the digital humanities? And here I would say it depends. It depends whether you look at the computational linguistics from the aspect that this is still a humanities discipline, or as we have seen, that computational linguistics is no longer a part of the humanities. And if computational linguistics does not belong to the humanities, then consequently, computational linguistics does not belong to the digital humanities. And I am inclined to say that this is the case in most branches of the computational linguistics. But linguistic research that belongs to the humanities and so that would not be possible without the use of computer exists. And this is what I would call digital linguistics. So digital linguistics is linguistic research that would not be possible without the use of computers, like humanities research that would not be possible without the use of computers. And then we have this field that belongs to the linguistics aspect of the digital humanities is what I would call digital linguistics. But we can continue with the definition and to refine this definition somehow. The digital linguistics is a science that builds and studies digital twins of language, whether understood as parole, langue, or langage. It is a relatively new but independent interdisciplinary field. It is closely related to such domains such as traditional linguistics, computational linguistics, information science, and of course, digital humanities. Or it is a branch within the digital humanities. And this definition is from this mentioned upcoming book. Well, upcoming, it will take two years from now, so we haven't, it's still some road to go. But nonetheless, Alexandra Lenz, who's here, thank you, and Pavel Komotsky, who helped me with the slides, and I are editing this, this book on Handbook on Digital Linguistics. So now I would like to talk about some activities within the digital linguistics, and I start with an overview of some of these activities. I would like to talk about two case studies. I do have some backup slides if we would like to talk about some other case studies as well, but I would like to talk about some of the case studies I'm involved in and that are somehow familiar here. With some of them you are familiar, and with some maybe not so. I will talk about linguistic infrastructures, Clarin, and the National Research Data Infrastructure mentioned by Tara. And I would like to talk about historical knowledge expressed in text. And this is a report on a project called NSYGNet. But I start with linguistic infrastructures. And there I give you two examples, Clarin and Text Plus. I start with Clarin. So Clarin, if you want to learn more about the European Clarin project, there's an open access publication that has been published in October 22. And it is an edited volume from Daria Fischer, who is now the executive director of the Clarin consortium, of the Clarin ERIC and me. And in this book, we present several aspects of the Clarin activities. And we also have one paper from Vienna and yeah. The main goals of Clarin is to construct and to run an integrated, an interoperable, and a scalable research infrastructure via a network of centers. This is done to deploy linguistic data, tools, and services. And the target group are researchers from the social sciences and the humanities, or the main target group. So the main target group is not necessarily linguists only, but all researchers from these diverse fields. The central structure of Clarin is a network of centers or of Clarin centers. And these Clarin centers host the infrastructure. They have central services that are provided. And these central services are promoted by training and by dissemination activities. Clarin enhances the accessibility and stability of linguistic research through its infrastructure and through these mechanisms mentioned a minute ago. So to give you an example, referencing resources is done via persistent identifiers, or short PIDs. Persistent identifiers have been developed to tackle the problem that we do not have a network of research infrastructure centers yet, but we would like to be able to address data in the same way as it is done in libraries. So libraries exist since thousands of years, and if you publish a book, you are certain that it is almost, you can be almost certain that it will end up in one of the libraries. So it does have some kind of sustainability. This is not the case for digital resources. This might change through these infrastructure consortia, but in the first step, you at least would like to be able to retrieve all the data independent from its location. And this is done by the use of persistent identifiers. The most well-known persistent identifier comes from the area of libraries. So we do have the document object identifiers. They are persistent. In Clarin, we use them, but we also use so-called handles that allow to address, for instance, lemmata in a digital dictionary. So we can use these handles for a fine-grained access to small resources, small objects. Referencing resources. also spares us with this last view to what we see in when referencing to web resources in a library, in a bibliography. Another aspect that is done is searching in resources. So, in a classical way, searching in resources by use of search engines is done with one large catalog where everything can be searched and everything is at one place. For instance, Google builds its catalog somewhere, and if you ask Google for finding something, then this catalog or this database is searched, is accessed. This is not necessarily possible in the humanities. We don't want this. We don't want to give all of our resources to somewhere, and in some cases we are not allowed to do this. So we do have to deal with copyright, we do have to do with privacy issues and all these things. So many of our resources have to stay at the place where they actually are. So they should not be harvested from anybody. The resources itself, the metadata might be harvested all the time, but the resources itself, not. But if we would like to search in these resources, then we can't do this with the classical approach that we build some kind of index and put it somewhere, but we have to search at the different places. For instance, here we have these Czech National Corpus, Český národní corpus. We have two different other corpora, one from Berlin, and they are hosted at their sites. And if you search or query these corpora, then you can use a federated search that starts its search in Prague, continues its search in Berlin and all the other centers, and collects only the PIDs of the resources that were found with this query. And then, in a second step, the institution can decide whether they offer some kind of snippets from this data. So this is one of the uses of this infrastructure. Some of the technology is reused in something that is called the research infrastructure, the National Research Infrastructure Consortium, the NFDI, in German Nationale Forschungsdateninfrastruktur. And this is a large-scale initiative because not only linguists, not only digital humanities people, not only digital social science people are interested in research data. The contrary is the case. The sciences, life sciences, for instance, the technical sciences, the engineering sciences are very, very much interested in research data as well, or mainly, even more than we. And they face the same problems. They faced the non-accessibility and the non-sustainability of research data, and therefore, at some point, some institutions in Germany decided to start a large-scale project funding on building up something that is comparable with a library network, but for research data. And this is called the National Research Data Infrastructure. Within this National Research Data Infrastructure, we have several consortia, up to now some, I think 26 or so, from all areas, from physics, from life science, from engineering, and one from text-oriented sciences. And some of the activities, some of the players here are given on this slide. That is a little bit corrupt, but yeah, we do have, these are the main participants, the German National Library and two academies and another library and the Leibniz Institute for the German Language, where I actually work. And If you want to learn a little bit more, I have also some leaflets about the Leibniz Institute für Deutsche Sprache there. You can take it with you. They are German and they are in English. The Text Plus consortium was founded 2.5 years ago, and we deal with several domains. It's not just linguistics we are dealing with. We deal with collections in the broadest sense you can imagine, from text collections from corpora to data from brain scans when processing language and so on, or eye tracker experiments and all these things. Then we have one branch that deals with lexical resources. So, for instance, dictionaries, digital dictionaries, but also word information systems, frame nets, word nets, and so on. And a third domain that is probably would be quite strong here in this area is editions. So critical editions from whatever domain, from literary, from natural science, and so on. This is relevant for several fields, of course, for linguistics, for literary studies, cultural studies, for anthropology. But since almost everybody deals with text, it might be interesting for all the other fields as well. For instance, the German National Library hosts all the dissertation theses that have been published in Germany. And they are not only interesting from the text-based point of view, but also from the domains, of course. What we do there is, in a way, analog to the activities in Clarion and also in the Daria infrastructure. So we try to build a kind of a distributed network where we use centers, and to make sure that these centers are sustainable, we ask them to certify. They ask for certification. For instance, the Core Trust Seal is one means to do this. The mentioned Nestor project is also offer a certification according to ISO standard. And talking about standards, all the data has to be given in a standardized way. Well, we know TEI very well, but there are also other standards that are used. And whenever you deal with digital representations, whenever you deal with digital data, with research data, you have to be aware that certain legal conditions might apply. This is true for our humanities data, because copyright, for instance, applies to all the texts from authors that are still alive or that died less than 70 years ago. We have privacy data, but the same is also true for other domains like health science, life science, medicine, and so on. So we have these cross-cutting topics, and we deal with these as well. I mentioned that in the research data infrastructure, there are several non-humanities projects. There are several consortia that deal with totally different things. But we also have quite some consortia that deal with digital humanities data. So Text Plus, I just mentioned, but there's also a community called NFDI for Culture. And this NFDI for Culture deals, for instance, with music, with archaeology, with media studies, and so on. And we also have a consortium called NFDI for Memory, and this deals with data from especially history, but also from economy and social history, so contemporary history, but also economic history, history of science, but also in area studies, religious studies, and so on. So memory institutions are part of this. And there is something that is also, like maybe computational linguistics, a little bit on the borderline between humanities and other areas. I talk about archaeology. Archaeology is traditionally a humanities studies area, but they use so many engineering that they are quite often, or that they also emerge more and more into this field of the, yes, what some people call hard sciences. So, and archaeological data is hosted, is processed, is archived in the infrastructure NFDI for objects. So this is the view, and then we also have some consortia that deal with social sciences and so on. So linguistics and computational linguistics, and especially digital linguistics, deals with aspects of these research data management. And this is a little bit surprising on their first view, because it deals very indirectly with language. So now I would like to start with, end with a third application area, namely something totally different: the historical knowledge expressed in texts. And I would like to introduce a project called EncycNet, and the members who are also involved in these in the preparation of these slides are Thora Hagen, a PhD student from Würzburg, Fotis Janidis, and me. And what we are interested in is graph-based modeling of essentially 19th century encyclopedia, or what historians call the long 19th century, so starting with the late these knowledge is given in different encyclopedia we examine. Essentially, these are 22 historical German reference works published between 1721 and 1912. Also, I want to say the long 18th century. Sorry, and no, sorry, I'm right. Cut. The long 19th century was right. These reference books are given in a digital way, so they already have been XML annotated. We used general encyclopedias, lexica of mythology, religious works, and also one encyclopedia that targeted towards women. So, and this one I will also mention a little bit more extensively in a few minutes. We have 50 million word tokens and about 500 or 420,000 entries. In a way, these encyclopedias can serve as a reflection of conventional knowledge at a particular time. As you have also in Vienna, if you look at the newspaper corpus you built, the Wiener Zeitung, where you can look at the developments in the last, say, 200 years or even longer, and you see what happened. And essentially, this is also seen in these encyclopedia. So we have a vast amount of historical knowledge in this data. The question is, how can we get this information? How can we deal with this information? And therefore, linguistic knowledge is essential. So, as an example, so we have a list of these encyclopedias. And the goal of this project, or the goals, were two ways. We want to provide a uniform annotated document, TI document, that contains all the data in the encyclopedias. And we wanted to create a knowledge graph of the content of these encyclopedia to provide new ways in which the data might be analyzed. And some of the research questions is, how does the knowledge about concepts change over time? How do relate several concepts to each other? And what are the central issues at a given time? So these, as an example, since this was a presentation I gave at the German History Institute in Washington, D.C., I used this example with Washington. So in Herders Konversationslexikon, we see a text on Washington in Sütterlin script. And we haven't digitized this data by ourselves. This was done by Zeno.org, and it was purchased, the data was purchased by a project called TextGrid some 15 years ago. The Zeno.org digitization gave us, it is still, you can still consult the Zeno.org pages. You see lots of advertisements and all these things, but the source of the data was quite okay, but far from being perfect. What we did an up conversation to proper TEI, and this TEI was used for our next steps. And the next step was that we built the concept, that we built knowledge graphs out of this concept. So essentially, encyclopedia contain knowledge, and this knowledge can be in a text-based way, and it can be structured in a better usable way by making connections between these different nodes in a knowledge graph. So what is the relation to the river that runs through Washington, D.C.? What is the relation to Georgetown? What relation exists to some other information like the number of inhabitants and so on? The TI corpus was based on TI-LEX 0. And about these steps, I don't have to say too much. You can imagine what you have to do. It's quite a lot of work, but not so interesting. So, but it is necessary. But you can access the corpus, for instance, by Zenodo. Then we use knowledge graphs. Knowledge graphs have been popularized by some 10 years ago, especially by Google. And they provide a mechanism that allows automatic search, automatic preparation, automatic consultation of this data in a flexible and intuitive way. And the knowledge is organized in what they call triples. So we have nodes and we have connections. So the German Historical Institute in Washington, D.C. is an instance of a larger hypervolume, if you like, a research institute. And Washington is an instance of cities, or an instance of cities in the US. Of course, we have to deal, whenever we deal with language, we have to deal with ambiguities. So we have to align the word to the right concept. For instance, if you have something like the word ruler, you have a powerful person, or you have these means to measure distances. And you have to find the correct one, and then you can, for instance, describe this ruler as a piece of plastic or wood that is used to measure something. In some cases, we also have only one connection. Trash, for instance, could be represented as an instance of rubbish. So essentially, we do have these books. We have the digitized books, and these books are transferred, or the knowledge given in these books are transferred to a knowledge graph, and the knowledge graph is usable as information source for several questions. And those of you who know something like DBpedia, it's essentially the same aspect. So in DBpedia, you have a machine processable representation of the knowledge within Wikipedia, but we are interested in the historical knowledge. And as the last example, I will talk about some application of this, namely a quantitative analysis of gendered assumptions. In the 19th century, there was only one, I think, encyclopedia published that addressed specifically the educated woman at this time. And it is called das Damen-Konversationslexikon. It was published between 1834 and 1838. It had 10 volumes with 1.5 million word tokens, and the entries were, so it looked like a normal encyclopedia, but it was, in a way, the entries were selected in a way what the editor, by the way, a man, thought that would be interesting for women at that time. And we wanted to look what these encyclopedia have in common with the other encyclopedias. For instance, we looked at the amount of proportion of biographies from men and women. We looked at the length of the biographies for men and women, and we looked at the amount of dates. And the reference corpus was 5 historical general German encyclopedias dating from 1809 to 1911. So these are what we compared the Damen lexicon with. So the amount of biographies in the Damen Damenlex was about was divided into the amount of biographies from women and men were different in these, significantly different in these different encyclopedia. So a much higher percentage of female biographies were printed in this Damen encyclopedia. So we have in this Brockhaus from 1809, but also in the Brockhaus from 1837, 95% biographies of men. And in the Damen lexicon, in the Damen encyclopedia, we have some 60% of biographies of men. Or to state the other way around, we have 40% of biographies of women in the Damenlex, and we have about 5% of biographies of women in this in the other lexicon. Then we looked at the most frequent words that can be found in these biographies, in the biographies of women and in the biographies of men. So we do have some things that are seeable in we have family relations that can be found in this this encyclopedia. We have roles and labels, and I think I missed the figures here. Yeah, but the most frequent words are different. So we saw in the biographies of women that there were more written. There were family relations have been more frequently used, and in the biography of men, they mainly talked about the profession of these persons and so on. So the description of the persons is different, and then we looked into the third thesis, because this editor Herlofsson, who edited the Damen Lexicon, the encyclopedia for women, mentioned in this description why he built things like he did. Women don't like reading lots of dates, more or less that's the quote. And we looked at this statement and we tagged these lexica, these encyclopedias, and we found, yes, it's true, they used less dates when, for instance, in the Brockhaus, that has been published 25 years ago. But we also see that the use of dates is not really significant, more in this general lexico, in this general encyclopedias than in the Damenlex. But what we see is that over time, the use of dates increases, independent from women lexicon and general lexicon. And this might be related to the fact that encyclopedias, encyclopedic knowledge tends towards something like the presentation of more objectivity in the data than before. And this is something we are doing some research on right now, and we hope that we will publish these things in the next DH conference in Washington, DC. Okay, I would like to come up with some other fields, specific fields that are influenced with digital humanities or digital linguistics. I just want to mention them. So other fields in digital linguistics are research on the language of social media, of computer-mediated communication, stylometry or forensic linguistics is a field that makes use of digital methods. Neurolinguistics, biolinguistics, somehow, well, they make use of digital methods, but it is somehow part of the digital linguistics, or is it more part of the natural sciences? Hard to say. Definitely language learning, language acquisition is something that is heavily influenced from digital methods, historical linguistics, and all this research on language evolution is done with simulations on language. Translation research, especially when we deal with machine-generated text, machine translation is part of the digital linguistics, and also comparative digital linguistics is going to evolve. Dialectology, language maps are more and more digital, and also phonology, phonetics is not imaginable without the use of digital methods any longer. So this is what I wanted to mention about digital linguistics, and I'm happy to hear some questions.